Garden Basics with Farmer Fred is brought to you by Smart Pots, the original lightweight, long-lasting fabric plant container. It's made in the USA. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information and a special discount. That's smartpots.com/Fred. Welcome to the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast. If you're just a beginning gardener or you want good gardening information, well, you've come to the right spot. It's Farmer Fred garden rule number 1. Bermudagrass is forever. You think I'm kidding? Ask any gardener who's battled this triple threat weed, which can reproduce and spread via seeds, stems, and rootstocks. Retired college horticulture professor Debbie Flower gives us some ideas for control and suppression tactics when it comes to battling Bermudagrass. And please note, I didn't say eradicate. Among her suggestions for controlling this weed, remembering the first letters of the phrase, "Clean my plants before Christmas." That would be CMPBC. If you remember that insight and put it into practice, it's going to help you control a wide variety of backyard pests, including weeds. The UC Davis Arboretum and Public Garden Superintendent Emeritus Warren Roberts tells us about a tree that has it all: great fall color, an interesting form, and tasty fruit this time of year. What is the plant of the week? Why, it's the persimmon tree. Podcasting from Barking Dog Studios here in the beautiful Abutilon jungle in suburban Purgatory, it's episode 155 of the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast, brought to you today by Smart Pots and Dave Wilson Nursery. And we'll do it all in just a little over 30 minutes. Let's go. We like to answer your garden questions here on the Garden Basics podcast. Send your questions in a myriad of ways. You can phone them in. You can text them in. The number to call, 916-292-8964, 916-292-8964. Or you can go to speakpipe.com/gardenbasics and talk into your computer and leave a question that way. And you can also leave questions at the social media sites such as Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And today's question came in via Facebook. Debbie Flower is here, our favorite retired college horticultural professor, and we've been tackling a lot of weeds, and people seem to have their favorite weeds. All weeds are local.
Yeah, they are. That's true. The population changes depending on where you live.
And I believe that today's weed is one that I know is very popular here in California and probably elsewhere throughout the West.
Yes, in the warmer places.
And it is Bermudagrass.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man. And this person asks at the Get Growing with Farmer Fred Facebook page, are there any plants that overpower or nudge out Bermudagrass? Is there any organic methods to eradicate it? Well, that's the good news. There are ways. Maybe we shouldn't say eradicate. Let's just say suppress or control. In fact, if you look at chemical solutions for Bermudagrass, it's never eradicate.
Right. Subdued, maybe, but not eradicated. And someone I know, and you may know this person too, says Bermudagrass is forever.
Bermudagrass is forever. Indeed it is. Explain why that is.
Bermudagrass has multiple ways of reproducing and of storing food so that it can regrow if other parts are broken off. So it has what's called a rhizome, which is an underground stem that grows horizontally under the soil, and it is somewhat fat. It's not super fat, but it's fat enough for it to store food all along the length of that underground stem, and it can be very deep in the soil. The depth that things grow in soil is very dependent on soil type and the availability of oxygen and water there, but Bermudagrass has proven to be able to grow in very variable conditions, including deeper in the soil. So that's one way that it stores food. And if you break off a piece of that rhizome and put it on the soil somewhere else, it will regrow from there. It also has stolons. Stolons are another type of stem. There's stems that also store food, and they travel across the surface of the soil. I used to tell my students that stolons steal space.
Stolons steal space.
Yes, because as this stem grows across the surface of the soil, at every node, a node is where a leaf or another stem or a branch would grow, it can also grow roots. And so you can break off either side of that node and it can make itself a whole new plant. So it reproduce that way. And then, of course, it flowers. And so it produces a stalk with it looks like the ribs of an umbrella, the flower structure, and there are lots of little seeds in there, and so it can reproduce from seeds.
Looks kind of like turkey legs.
Yes, true.
We used to say that.
Okay.
All the time. By the way, for you Scrabble or Words with Friends fans, stolon, like what we're talking about here, is S-T-O-L-O-N.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. It doesn't actually have the E in it, that when someone robs you,
however,
kind of stolen.
Stolons do rob you of soil.
They rob you of soil. They rob your plants of space to grow. And then those stolons are very waxy, and they can, if you let the Bermudagrass grow, if you inherit a patch of heavily infested soil that is heavily infested with Bermudagrass, they will grow over each other. And eventually you get a layer of very waxy stems that will not allow water to penetrate. And so it's very difficult for other things to grow. So if you go to pull it out, you've left the rhizomes underground and potentially broken off the stolons where they have rooted at other places in the ground. And so it just makes more plants.
Stolons, rhizomes can last for up to 50 years.
Wow.
That's just crazy. Yes, Bermudagrass is forever. Now, way back when we were discussing field bindweed, you came up with your Hawaiian vacation mnemonic of POI, P-O-I, ATM. Hence, if you go to a luau in Hawaii, save your money, or you're going to be using the ATM before you go to the luau if you want to eat the poi.
Exactly.
POI, ATM, stands for, be my guest.
Prevent. These are the integrated pest management strategies. Prevent the pest in the first place. Observe, so watch the landscape and see when that pest shows up. It's much easier to control pests when they are either in a small population or a young seedling, so they're very young. Identify. You got to know what it is if you're going to take care of it. A and T both work together as action threshold. So at what point do you need to take action? With things like Bermudagrass and field bindweed, it's right away. Your action threshold is when you see the first plant. Other things, maybe like aphids, if we're talking insects, you can wait and see what's going to happen. So your action threshold may not be when you see the very first aphid. And then there are management methods. That's what the M is for.
And interestingly enough, you came up with another mnemonic when we were talking about oxalis, which was sort of a subset of the action threshold, and it was BIS.
BIS. Control weeds, BIS. That's for everyone, all weeds. That means before it sets seed.
That makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. When you have one plant, if you allow it to set seed, you potentially have thousands of plants. Weeds are weeds because they survive well and they reproduce vigorously, often through seed production.
And then a while back, we learned a new one from Warren Roberts, the superintendent of the UC Davis Arboretum, who was trying to remember how to spell ginkgo, the ginkgo tree. Is it G-I-N-K-G-O or G-I-N-G-K-O? And he remembers it by dividing it into two very well-known products, gin, that you might imbibe in, and KGO, which is a radio station in San Francisco. So that is now permanently emblazoned in my brain.
Yes, mnemonics are wonderful things if you're trying to learn something.
And I learned a new one, too, for astronomy students.
Oh, yes?
For that determines the temperature of stars. You know, when you stare at stars at night, some might appear blue, some appear red. Our sun is a star. It appears kind of white with a yellowish tinge. Well, it all has to do with the temperature of that particular star. And the way to remember how they're classified, students use the mnemonic, "Oh, be a fine girl, kiss me," which is O-B-A-F-G-K-M. And that refers to the class of star they're in. The O class are the brightest stars. And it goes on down the line. Our sun is a G classification. And what happened, though, is this was developed like decades ago. But since they have more powerful telescopes now, they have discovered brown dwarfs or faint stars that also have fall into a classification. So they added some new classifications. So to "Oh, be a fine girl, kiss me," you can add to that "no tongue, yo." The N, the T, and the Y for new classifications of stars.
That's funny.
And of course, now in college textbooks where they have this, they've actually made it more politically correct. So now it's "Oh, be a fine girl / guy.
Okay.
No talk, yo." You have one for an IPM, integrated pest management technique for Bermudagrass.
It's an order of management methods that is suggested by the integrated pest management technique so that you do the least damage to the earth first.
Fair enough.
Mm-hmm. And
clean my plants.
Yes.
Before Christmas?
Before Christmas.
All right. Clean my plants before Christmas. CMPBC.
You're right.
What does that mean?
So that's the order of operations to try to control a pest. So C is cultural, and cultural is how you maintain the plant. Maybe how often you water it. Well, that's an example.
How about mowing?
Whether you mow it, change the level of mowing. Mow it for Bermudagrass, you would mow high.
Right.
And that is because Bermudagrass doesn't do well in shady places. And if you have long grass blades, it would be 3 inches here in an arid place. It would be 2 inches in a more humid place. Then they don't grow so well. They don't disappear necessarily, but they don't grow as well with that shade that the extra length of the grass blade provides.
Some may be wondering, well, where are those grass blades coming from if you have a Bermudagrass lawn? A lot of people here in the West, if they had a Bermudagrass lawn, Bermudagrass goes dormant in the wintertime and turn brown. So a lot of people got in the habit of overseeding with ryegrass.
Yes.
Ryegrass doesn't do very well in high heat, but 9 months of the year, it'll grow.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful.
Yeah. And so the ryegrass is what could possibly be used to shade out competition from the Bermudagrass.
Right. Or if you're like me and have a fescue lawn, the Bermudagrass, fescue is a bunch grass, and so it grows in tufts. It's a kind of we let it grow long, so it becomes a very tufted grass. If you mow it, it doesn't become so hummocky. But especially in the very sunny edges of the lawn, right up against the concrete driveway, the Bermudagrass has found its way in.
I love hummocky. That means lumpy.
Lumpy. Yeah, yes. Lumpy.
Okay.
So M, clean. My is M. Mechanical. Mechanical is like hand pulling or digging it out, especially before the seeds form. At my house, it's my husband's lawn. We wouldn't have a lawn if it were my house. If it were, we wouldn't have a lawn if it were just my landscape.
He gets it in the divorce.
He gets it in the divorce, right? So he wanted the lawn. He wants it his way. Fine. I don't take care of it, but I will point out when it goes into seed, the Bermudagrass is seeding over the fescue, or I will just go out there and pull that off myself because I know how terrible it is to let that happen.
You're a great weed puller.
I am a great weed puller. It's my therapy.
Yes.
It's cheaper than a therapist.
So that's a physical control.
That's mechanical
control. That's right.
Right. Physical is like creating a physical environment is what it really refers to. So it's creating the environment that either benefits the plant or does not benefit the weed, and in this case, the shade. If you grew other plants around it, like I said, the Bermudagrass is invading the sunny, hot spots of my lawn, not the shady, moisture spots. So if you were able to create shade in those hot, sunny spots, then the Bermudagrass would not do so well.
Yeah, plant it on the south side,
right?
For example, to shade it. Well, it's not going to eliminate it, but it's going to slow it down.
Yeah. Right.
And that's all we're trying to do here.
Right. That's all we can do.
Yeah.
Clean my plants. Before is biological. There are, for other pests, there are biological controls, meaning insects that eat insects or diseases that will infect insects, or there are insects that will eat the seeds of weeds. I am not aware of any biological controls for Bermudagrass. And then C is chemical. So that's the last resort. Chemical control, meaning pesticides, in this case herbicides, is the last resort to control of a pest. We want to try everything else before we break out the chemicals, because chemicals are poisons, and the more poisons we add to our earth, the less quality of life we may have.
This is one thing that I think has been the sea change in horticulture over the past 30, 40 years, is, from my own experience answering gardening questions on the radio, the questions used to be way back when, what can I buy to control da-da-da?
Absolutely. What can I spray?
Yeah. And now more and more people are saying, what can I do to control whatever? And that's where integrated pest management comes in.
I agree 100%.
Yeah. And darn if it doesn't work.
You want another mnemonic?
Sure. Why not?
This one is for the signal words on pesticide labels.
Okay.
Pesticides have to be registered with the federal government first, the Environmental Protection Agency, and then the states get to decide how they want to register them based on what the federal government has done. In California, we have our own state EPA. And so some pesticides are not allowed in California that the federal government allows. But you can't do the reverse. We can't use pesticides in California that are not allowed by the federal government. Pesticides are by their level of toxicity. And toxicity is poisonous. And it's rated for humans. How toxic are they to humans? How poisonous are they to humans? And so then they're given a word and a number. And I always had trouble. Danger to me sounds like the worst word. I always had trouble remembering which came next, warning or caution, caution or warning. So my mnemonic is 3, 2, 1, cat will die.
Okay. I went the other way from least toxic to most toxic while you were talking and came up with cows wander dairies.
Okay, that works.
But basically, yeah, if you're shopping for, and by the way, let's define what a pesticide is, because people may be confused. They're thinking, I thought they were talking about weeds, and now they're talking pesticides.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's a pest.
Yes, right. Weeds are a pest. I was talking to my son, who's now a homeowner, and he wants to control his weeds. And he said, well, not pesticide, herbicide. So, well, an herbicide is a pesticide. A pesticide is an umbrella term over all the pests. Weeds are pests. Diseases are pests. Vertebrates, which is anything with a backbone, can be a pest. Insects are pests. They're invertebrates. They don't have a backbone. So we have all different kinds. Under pesticides, we have herbicides for weeds, insecticides for insects. We have algicides for algae. We have fungicides for fungus, bactericides for bacteria, etc. An herbicide is a type of pesticide.
And of the herbicides, if we really want to go into this conversation, I'm not so sure, just because it is so very confusing. There are products on the market that talk about suppressing and controlling Bermudagrass, but they have to be applied at the right time and in the right situations. You have to make sure that your other turf areas or ornamental plants won't be affected by the product.
Right. A big part of that registration through the federal government and then through the state government is the creation of the label. And the label is a legal document. You have to, by law, you have to follow it. Technically, you can only be fined if you do not follow the label and you are applying pesticides for hire. So homeowners, you can poison yourself all you want, according to the government. But if you work in the industry or you have someone come in and maintain your garden, they must have a license in order to apply pesticides. And they have to follow the label. The label is the law. And the label will tell you under what conditions to apply or to not apply this pesticide. And could be growth condition of the weed, could be temperature of the air, could be season, based on the physiology of the plant and the weed itself.
And how the plant is growing, too. Can it be stressed and apply it? Probably not. It probably needs to be actively growing.
Right. That's one thing people get confused about with herbicides, pesticides that kill plants, is that I do it. I go out and I think, I got to treat this Bermudagrass, but I'm out here with my hands and I start pulling. That means I have to wait. You want to apply the herbicide when the weed is actively growing and big and lush and happy, because then it will be able to absorb the chemical pesticide the most and the best. And that's what you want to subdue or control that weed.
And read and follow all label directions.
Right. It's the law.
Yeah. And it is such a morass. I will have a link to a very good chemical discussion of what to use to control or suppress Bermudagrass in today's show notes from the University of California. It'll also be in the Garden Basics newsletter for this episode as well. So check that out if you're looking for names like Weed Be Gone or Turf Lawn or whatever. And it's interesting how in that University of California discussion, they get right back to saying, really, the only thing that works is soil solarization.
And even that only works in the top few inches. And if this is horrible Bermuda grass infestation, those roots can go down, a foot, more than a foot?
Oh, yeah.
And potentially the rhizomes are down there too, and it could resprout. But hopefully it'll take time.
Soil solarization is best accomplished in the heat of the summer. So you're talking June, July, and August. That has a chance for a well-saturated area that's covered with clear plastic to reach temperatures of 120 degrees or more.
Right.
And then when you're done, don't rototill, because that just brings up more rhizomes and stolons and whatever seeds up to the surface. I did soil solarization once on 2,000 square feet of what was originally planted as a Bermuda grass lawn. Mm-hmm. Stupid me. But then back then, that was popular as far as planting a Bermuda grass lawn.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But the soil solarization worked like a charm. I kept that clear plastic down there for 6 weeks. When I removed it, I put down 3 inches of a fine compost, and on top of that, 4 inches of a rough mulch, chipped and shredded tree parts. Mm-hmm. Bermuda grass never came back.
Oh, how wonderful.
And if it did, it was just like one little seedling popped up that you could just pull out really easily.
And that may have seeded in. That may have been a new infestation.
Right, exactly. So it does work if you do it at the right time. We'll have a link to soil solarization as well. Mm-hmm. You can do... Is it called soil solarization when you do it in the wintertime? When you're just throwing down 12 inches of mulch or whatever?
That would be eliminating the light, I would think.
Yeah, and that's an option, but it's not as effective as heating the soil. Right.
Heating the soil actually kills things. Eliminating the light, and I've seen articles about and tried different things in like the path of a newly planted vegetable garden, using old pieces of carpet, for instance. And that just, the seeds still germinate in the darkness of the soil and the garden under the rug or under the very thick mulch, but they can't get to the sun in order to make their own food and grow and thrive. So they die instead. When you do cover an area with something that makes it dark, and I know people do it, please don't do it. Black plastic is something people think of to do this, but it just makes a mess. Landscape fabric, same thing. I see people do it. It just, the weeds will grow right into that landscape fabric. But you can use other things. People talk about sheet mulching. It has its pros and cons with newspaper and cardboard.
And mulch.
And mulch on top, right. Watch the edges of that bed, whatever it is. Even laying carpet down in the aisle of the vegetable garden, weeds will come up right around the edge. Any place that they can find to get some sun, that's what they're looking for.
It's Farmer Fred garden rule number 1. Bermuda grass is forever.
Yeah.
But you can suppress or control it.
Suppress or control, yes.
Good luck to all of us. Mm-hmm. Debbie Flower, thanks for the help.
Thank you, Fred.
We're glad to have Smart Pots on board supporting the Garden Basics podcast. Smart Pots, it's the original award-winning fabric planter. It's sold worldwide, and Smart Pots are proudly made 100% in the USA. Smart Pots come in a wide array of sizes and colors. If a frost or freeze is in the forecast, moving your frost tender plants that are in the Smart Pots that have handles make them easier to move closer to the house for added warmth, or you could even move them inside for the winter. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information about the complete line of Smart Pots lightweight, colorful fabric containers. And don't forget that /Fred part, because on that page are details of discounts when you buy Smart Pots at Amazon. If you want to see them before you buy, Smart Pots are available at independent garden centers and select Ace and True Value hardware stores nationwide. To find a store near you, visit smartpots.com/Fred. Every week, we like to talk with Warren Roberts. He is the Superintendent Emeritus of the UC Davis Arboretum and Public Garden. We always like to get a plant of the week from him. And today's plant is one of my favorites. It has great fall color. It has tasty fruit. It has a wonderful whitish bark. It's hard to dislike anything about the persimmon, Warren.
No, I agree. It's tree we're talking about, the scientific name is Diospyros kaki, Diospyros kaki. The specific epithet in this case is the Japanese common name, or one of the Japanese common names.
Now, we should not confuse that with the American persimmon.
The name persimmon comes from the Powhatan language of the Algonquian language group. Powhatan was spoken, or still is, in the Virginia area. And in fact, the word opossum is also from the same language. And opossums feed on persimmons.
Oh, well, it's a rather widespread American tree. It's native from Connecticut to Kansas to Texas and Florida.
Yes, I think it even gets into Mexico. And in Mexico, there's another species, Diospyros digina, which is the sapote negro, or the black sapote, and also edible. The sapote negro is a rather large fruit. The Diospyros virginiana is about the size of a ping pong ball, maybe a little smaller. And a very similar species in Asia, Diospyros lotus, Lotus, looks much the same. Now, almost all persimmons to be edible need to blet, B-L-E-T. And that means a softening, ripening, so that when the fruit is firm, it's amazingly astringent, where there are exceptions. But the fruit needs to blet or soften. Then it can be et. That's the blet before it's et.
In the world of the Japanese or Oriental persimmon, of course, there's the Fuyu persimmon, which is non-astringent, and you can eat that when it's firm.
That one, and the Gosho cultivar, which is similar but larger than the Fuyu. Yes, you can eat them. They should be a good orange color, though.
Right.
If they still have some green on them, you can eat them, but they're not very sweet. And very delicious. Oh, my goodness, it's great in so many things, in salads and in desserts. And then you can also let the fuyu ripen like the hachiya, which is the large one with a rather pointed tip. That one cannot be eaten firm, but when it softens, it's tasty.
You could eat it when it is firm, but have somebody standing by with a camera to take a picture of your face.
Yes, you can. There's also a way, evidently, of making little slits underneath the calyx. That's that rather beautiful pointed leafy structure at the base of the persimmon, and then turning the persimmon upside down and putting alcohol, ethanol, regular, vodka, in the space, and then after several days, the astringency disappears. I've never tried that. I've just heard about that.
Seems like a waste of vodka.
Well, except then you have a hachiya, which is firm, and you can eat it when it's firm. And if you have persimmon trees, usually they produce way more fruit than a family can eat. But you can make wonderful desserts from it. Persimmon pudding is something I've known most of my life, and it's like plum pudding, but using persimmon and walnuts, and it's just so delicious. But it used to be that I said I would eat one persimmon a year, one of those big, sloppy, soft hachiyas, and enjoy it, and then next year I'd have one again. But over the years, I've softened, as it were, and I'll eat them whenever they're available.
Well, you've lost a lot of your astringency.
Yes, I have. But one of the really fine things, as you were pointing out earlier about the persimmon, is how beautiful they are on the tree. And the fall color of the Diospyros kaki, the common, what we'd call Asian persimmon or Japanese persimmon, is that the fall color is beautiful, oranges, reds, and in between. And then when they fall, the tree is still covered with this beautiful, not covered, but is ornamented with these beautiful orange fruit, which stay on the tree until they drop or until they're picked. And it's just it's a really breathtaking sight in the late fall, a persimmon tree with the fruit still hanging in the tree.
I was marveling at one today while driving up to the Sierra Nevada foothills to Auburn. It was next to the road, and it was a big tree. It looked to be about 40 feet tall, and it looked like a Christmas ornament.
Yes, they do. It's just amazing. Of course, Christmas ornaments are said to imitate fruit anyway. But I think in that case, in Eastern Asia, the pomegranate. But the persimmon tree is so beautiful. But if you have one, make sure you have friends or family members that like the tree, because they make a real mess if you would just let them fall. Now, in our neighborhood, we have three species of squirrels, 2 native and 1 not, that will pick up after the persimmon tree. But most of the time, it's picked and shared.
Exactly. And as I like to do, dehydrate them, slice them up into 1/4-inch slices and put them on the dehydrator for a few hours.
Oh, yes. And then you can enjoy them all year. Another little footnote to persimmons is that the ebony, the beautiful black tropical wood, is the wood of species of persimmon. And it's so the persimmon is in the ebony family, the Eboniaceae. I think, though, it's better to let the tree stand and save the wood for the tree itself and enjoy the fruit.
We should probably delineate a bit about the differences between the American persimmon and the Japanese persimmon, the tree itself, in that the American persimmon isn't quite as well-mannered, shall we say, as the Japanese persimmon.
Well, no, I guess you could say that. But in that case, the fruit is certainly not edible until it has bled and fallen. But then when you eat it, it tastes like butterscotch. It's so delicious. The American persimmon is amazingly tasty. But if you don't want the fruit, probably not a good idea to plant the tree. However, possums love them and will clean up after them. There are several mature North American persimmons in the area. There's an old one in Capitol Park that has beautifully tessellated bark. It looks like tiles set in the trunk. And in that case, there are female trees and male trees for the American persimmon. But I don't know of anybody who has selected them for the male form, which would be more useful in landscapes, I think.
Yeah, the Japanese persimmon, you can control the height of the tree as well to make it easier to pick the fruit. And I will vouch for what you were saying about possums and persimmon trees. At my former place, there were broken branches in the persimmon trees from possum climbing the tree and going too far out on the branch.
Sort of the impossible dream, I guess.
Impossible dream. Thank you very much for that. Yes. But the persimmon, it's a tasty fruit once it's either softened up, if it's an astringent variety, or if it's a non-astringent variety like the Fuyu. The best-selling home persimmon on the market is the Fuyu persimmon, and it's just a wonderful fall treat. I would highly recommend you get one. Warren Roberts, Superintendent Emeritus of the UC Davis Arboretum and Public Garden. Hey, thanks for the persimmon.
You're welcome.
If you're thinking of growing fruit trees, or maybe you already have your own backyard full of fruit trees, well, you probably have a million questions. Like, which fruit trees will grow well where I live? What are the tastiest fruits to grow? How do I care for them? What are the most important things to know when starting a backyard orchard? Well, the good news is those answers are just a click away with the informative videos that you can find at davewilson.com. That's Dave Wilson Nursery, the nation's largest grower of fruit trees for the backyard garden. At davewilson.com, you'll also find planting tips, taste test results, fruit variety recommendations, and links to nurseries in your area that carry Dave Wilson fruit trees. Your harvest to better health begins at davewilson.com. Don't forget, if you want to learn more about the topics covered on today's episode of Garden Basics with Farmer Fred, please subscribe to the free Garden Basics newsletter. It's on Substack. Details are in today's show notes. The Garden Basics podcast will be on its winter schedule from November through January, which means there will only be one episode per week during this 3-month period, and it'll come out on Fridays. Garden Basics with Farmer Fred is brought to you by Smart Pots, and we thank them for their support. Garden Basics, it's available for free wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and leaving comments. We appreciate it.